the best possible shape. But in truth, they were in the worst possible shape. They were outwardly rich, possessing plenty of goods, but somehow they had gotten the mistaken notion that they had need of nothing. They felt that their riches and their good formed their source of supply. They believed that they needed nothing else. Nothing more. As I gazed into the workings of that church, I too came up with a diagnosis for the church of the Laodiceans. Looking back at it, I believed that Laodicea suffered from a form of spiritual senility. It suffered a dementia of the most aggravating type. I'm not trying to be funny. I believe this. And I believe this to be the case because Laodicea had become forgetful. They said that they had need of nothing. Obviously, they forgot that they needed Jesus. I wonder if there's anybody here today who still needs Jesus. As blessed as you are, as lifted as you are, as gifted as you are, as awesome as you are, you still need Jesus. We have need of nothing. What a sad state for a church to be in when they can forget their need for the one who bled and died for it. What a tragic thing to forget that you need the one who purchased your salvation. And lest you think that I am being unfair in my diagnostic assessment, consider the fact that Laodicea was so forgetful where Jesus was concerned that they actually misplaced him. What do you mean, misplaced him? Recall what Jesus said to the church. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. I have often heard this statement used during an altar call, a call to bring the sinner to Christ. But Jesus is saying this to a church. I stand at the door and knock. And let me be honest here. I don't even know if Jesus really held out any hope for this church. Consider what he said. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man or woman hear my voice and open the door, I will come into him. I will sup with him and he with me. He's not talking now to the church. He's talking individually. If the church won't hear, maybe somebody in the church will hear. If the church isn't listening, maybe somebody in the church is listening. If the church isn't getting the message, maybe somebody's hearing a knock on the door of your heart. He who is to be the church's very epicenter found himself on the outside of the church of the Laodiceans looking in. This is why Jesus instructed John to write to the angel of the church of the Laodiceans. It was not his church anymore. It was their church. And to make matters worse, they didn't even notice that Jesus was gone. Did you hear what I said? They didn't even notice that Jesus was gone. They were like Samson in the days of old, who, when he had his locks shorn and was told, Samson, the Philistines be upon thee, simply said, I will go out and shake myself as other times, not knowing that the Lord had departed from him. And you all know the story. He shook, but there was no God in his shake. And so he was taken into captivity. When Laodicea shook, there was no God in their shake. And I just wonder if there's any God in our shake. When we shake, when we sing, when we cry, when we pray, is God around? Touch your neighbor and just ask him, is there any God in your shake? Is God still around when you shake it? Oh, see, some of y'all too dead to ask. I'm going to preach in a minute. They didn't realize that he was gone. The members of the church, and even the pastor, this time the messenger was rebuked as well to the angel of the church of the Laodiceans. Even the pastor came to the church time after time and never missed God's presence. They went through the motions and never missed God's presence. They did the church thing, y'all. They were like everybody else, but they never missed God's presence. They sang their songs, they waved their hands, they prayed their prayers, but they never missed the presence of God in their midst. And of all of the things that were said about Laodicea, this had to be the worst. Being wretched is a woeful thing, but missing Jesus in your midst is worse than being wretched. Being miserable is madness for a church. Who ever heard of a church that was miserable? Every now and then we have miserable folk in the church, but generally a church is not characterized by misery, but rather by mirth and joy because of the Spirit of God that is alive in the church. But even if it were possible to be miserable as a church, it is far worse to be missing Jesus. Being spiritually poor is a paradox for a church, but missing Jesus is infinitely worse. Being naked is deplorable. Being blind is almost as bad as it can get for a church, but not missing Jesus in your midst is worse than all of this. And I say it's worse because this is the aggregate of all of the others. This condition of spiritual forgetfulness, of not missing Jesus, is the sum total of all of the other things. And can I tell it like I feel it? In the presence of Jesus, there is fullness of joy. In the presence of Jesus, there are innumerable blessings. In the presence of the Lord, there are eternal pleasures. And they didn't even miss the presence of Jesus. Can I go ahead and preach? The other negative factors of this church were not contributing factors to Laodicea's spiritual senility. They were the result of its senility. Their wretchedness came in because they left Jesus out. The misery came